One of the objections that I get from admin heads and IT heads is about the data security and data privacy in a co-working or a flex office space. Valid concern, but it's not that it is unsurmountable. And there are obviously some misbeliefs and misconceptions about how co-working and managed offices handle your data and handle internet in more specifically and other aspects of security, which is what I want to kind of talk about in this video. I'm Sham, the founder of GoFloaters. We help startups of all sizes and shapes and enterprises with their flexible office space solutions. So now coming back, right, is data security. Yes, it's very important, and there is definitely very valid and visible risk of you using shared internet provided by a co-working space, and there could be challenges that you could face. So there are multiple ways to address this, and there are solutions for all of this. And in fact, you could get to as good as a security measure as you would get in any other form of office space. So that's the one that I want to clarify and elaborate on. Now let's break this down and talk about security as a whole, and then get into data security more specifically. Right? In a typical co-working environment that you might have visited, you probably would have seen a large floor where there's an open plan seating, and there are multiple team members of different companies working together shoulder to shoulder in a large office plan, and you might see like one person peeping over the other person's laptop and looking at what's happening. This is the co-working that we kind of, when the moment co-working or somebody says, hey, why are you not exploring managed offices or co-working? This is the image that comes to our mind, right? Yes, this is definitely co-working, but this is not the only definition of co-working, or this is not the only definition of flex offices in the larger context, right? So freelancers, smaller startups, and one-off users of co-working spaces, this is how they use it, right? But when companies approach this topic of taking up a co-working space or a managed office space, there are different ways to create an office environment for you. Even within a co-working space, you have access to private cabins or private offices or private suites, as different people call it. Those are under lock and key for just your employees, and even there'll be a dedicated access card that has to be used for the private cabin, the doors of the private cabin to be open for your team members. So one, from a physical security standpoint, you can get a private office space in a co-working space or a managed office space that is completely secured, and you box your team from, or the space from, other people who enter in the space. So one is the physical security aspect of it that is definitely addressable. Number two, getting into the internet or the data security aspect of it, right? Yes, in most co-working spaces, the default is that you get a shared internet infrastructure. Wi-Fi is definitely available. You can also get LAN access to your tables. That again is shared in most of the cases. That's the default, right? You have that as a backup. Most of the companies that I work with, if they are 50 plus, in fact, many of the IT startups, tech startups don't actually mind, because most of their infrastructure is on the cloud. They're connecting through secure SSL protocols. There's some of them, if they're connecting to client system, they use VPN to connect. So most of the startups, in fact, even funded startups, they're completely okay with using the shared internet available to connect to different cloud services, because they have implemented the best practices for cloud security in terms of password rotation instead of password strength, in terms of not sharing data on apps like WhatsApp and so on and so forth, just using official communication mechanisms to share information back and forth, and not leaving stuff outside of your private office like printouts and so on and so forth. So those are all these common security practices that anybody would want to follow. So as long as you follow that, the risk of a data leak is relatively low. But in spite of that, if you still want a higher grade of security, all co-working operators allow you to bring your own broadband connection. So you can bring your own dedicated internet line into your private office that you use for your teams, right? And then when you go to managed offices, you can even put your own firewalls and switches and route this internet line through those firewalls. You don't even depend on the shared firewalls and switches that a co-working space uses to route your internet data and traffic, right? Network data and traffic. So that's another thing that's possible. And then with managed offices, the other aspect of physical security is like, what if my printout, if I use a common shared printer, then printouts could potentially get misplaced and so on and so forth. When you design your own managed offices, if you are into a lot of printing, if you're into a lot of photocopying and stuff like that, You can have a repro area inside your office dedicated that you could use it for, and then that's part of your network, and you could have that completely China walled from anything else that's outside your private office. And lastly, when it comes to your teams and who's using what and who's doing what, when you design a managed office, you could have CCTV cameras designed the way you want. You could bring in your own access control systems, whether it is a RFID or whether it's a biometric or a face recognition. You can install your own access control systems connected to your HR and payroll systems. All these can be done exactly the way you would want to do it for your dedicated office, right? So all of this is possible. And when it comes to visitors and guest management, most of the operators have sophisticated ways to allow for visitors, ensure that the visitors are valid. I mean, the photo ID cards of them are validated before they come in, or OTPs are generated. Only pre-approved visitors could walk in and all that, right? The industry as a whole has matured from 2016, if that was the date, where India saw the first co-working space, and 2017, 2018 WeWork entered India, right? So from the days of the business center to co-working, and now to the days of enterprise managed offices, right? Lot has happened. A lot of improvement has happened over a period of time in terms of how these offices manage your data, how these offices manage your people, and how these offices manage visitors and guests, and overall how they have to adapt and tune themselves to the data security and compliance aspects of larger enterprises, right? Because now it's no longer the startups, right? So these same brands of co-working and managed offices also deal with European clients and American clients and clients from across the border, or even banks and financial institutions whose data security requirements are very, very controlled, right? And very, very elaborate. When flex offices are able to manage all of that, I'm sure they've figured out ways to do all of this, right? So let's be assured, while this is a very important topic, it is definitely not a roadblock for you to evaluate managed offices as an option when you're scaling and you're looking at a larger office footprint. Your flex office can definitely be part of your footprint and can tick off all these compliance and data security boxes that you have for your enterprise.